Welcome. So we have Miss Hunter here. We are in the last phase of our coaching cycle where we are closing it out, examining post-test data, and doing our reflection on the cycle. So this was a sixth grade math class, your second mod, and it was approximately 28 students in the class. And first, let's kind of go back to our pre-test data. So in the beginning, we were looking at a literacy focus of writing and the use of academic language and students being able to justify their responses. So in the beginning, 21 students were emerging, meaning there was no use of academic language or mention of operations with ratios. 5 students were developing, so that means there was limited use of academic language and operations with ratios. No students met or exceeded the literacy target, so that made a 0% proficiency. So now they've had a chance to engage in several different activities around type 2 questions where they were able to do a peer review activity where they had to answer a question and critique each other's writing with the focus on academic language and justifications. And then they were also able to do a couple other ratio type 2 questions just to get some practice with responding to open response questions. So our post-test was a mirror of the pre-test where students had to answer a type 2 question on ratios. They had to create their own equivalent ratios using the ratio that's given to them. So we had a chance to look at the post-test and we were able to sort them into 3 groups. So what 3 groups do we have and what are some trends that we noticed in those groups? We can start with our emerging. That'd be good. Yeah.
So, one of the things we noticed with the emerging group is that they answered part of the question, or they did not understand fully what the question was asking. So you can see a remnant of them saying, okay, I know it's a ratio problem, but then to make the equivalent ratios, they were still a little confused on that process of how to take an initial ratio into making it into an equivalent ratio.
Okay.
So, and being able to explain that, we're not seeing in the emerging group.
So we started off with 21 students, and now there are 10 students. So there's been almost a 50% decrease in the students who are emerging. So that's really, really good to see that students are actually doing better with responding and making the effort to answer the question.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's look at our developing category.
Our developing.
I'm sorry, y'all. Let me bring you some food up.
I'm gonna go down in a minute. Thank you. So in the developing group, the biggest thing we noticed is that they did show an understanding of equivalent ratios, but still not reading and answering fully the question that's asked. They partially answered the question. So it asked for 2 possible ratios, and they would give 1 instead of 2. They showed work or justification of their answer, but just not using the academic language to the best of their ability.
Okay.
I think that's what I noticed as we went through the papers.
Okay. And I also noticed that many students actually unlocked the prompt, which was their school-wide problem solving. So they actually took the time to circle where it says justify your answer or create 2 possible, even though they partially answered the question. So there is an attempt to actually really try to do more. And we started off with 5 students in the developing category, and now there are 13. Yes. So those students moved from emerging into the developing category. So that's good. Okay, and then our last category is meeting expectations. So these students actually were able to not only answer the question, but they did show their work with using a ratio table or showing their multiplication. And then they were also able to say that they multiplied the numerator and denominator to make an equivalent ratio.
Yes.
Okay. So we have 5 students. So that's 5 from 0. So that's major growth. 5 from 0. So they are getting it and they are making improvement. So thinking about some feedback that can be given to, I would say, maybe our middle group. So the kids who have partially answered the question are on the right track, but what can we say to them to help them move forward and actually be more successful?
Well, one thing as we started through this process, and I noticed that even though our students were unlocking the prompt,
Mm-hmm.
I challenged them also to make note of what actually are you being asked to do. So for this particular problem, they were asked to have 2 possible numbers of teachers and students, and then to justify why their answer is correct. So I told them, when doing these problems, after you've unlocked, circled, and underlined, and all those things, then just take a note of, I need 2 answers.
Mm-hmm.
I have to justify. So
Yeah.
if you write it out, because sometimes they miss exactly what they're being asked to do, with a lot of the verbiage and the problems and the words are in there, and they just kind of get lost. Some students get lost in that. So I think that would be something that I would have them to do or be more conscious of
Okay.
as they're doing these problems, because all of them in the emerging, the developing group, they answered at least one
Right.
ratio.
So they know what to do.
So it was just that they missed the 2.
The 2.
They just knew they had to do another ratio besides the one that was given, an equivalent ratio besides the one that was given in the problem. So that's one thing that I would challenge them with.
Any feedback on their justification? So a lot of students were able to have the right ratio. They came up with one of the correct answers, but may not have justified using the process or academic language.
I think another thing that a lot of times I make anchor charts,
Mm-hmm.
but I think to help them with the vocabulary is to just list that vocabulary.
Okay.
Like if we were doing a problem, we could discuss it. Like, okay, so what words would you need to see in your justification and explaining your answer? What mathematical words or academic language or vocabulary would be necessary for someone to know that you understand what ratios are?
Okay.
Because I put the charts there, but I don't know if they realize that you could use that language in your explanation. So I think just focusing more on that for them, because they can do the mathematics a lot of times, but when it's time to explain, we get very vague explanations and not really specific using those words.
Something else I was just thinking about that could be like similar to how they were able to review each other's. If you came up with 2 examples of the right answer, but one had academic language and one didn't, and seeing if they could find the difference in, oh, this person actually said, well, equivalent ratios, have to, if they're simplified, they have to be equivalent to the original ratio, unit rate or something like that, where it's 2 right answers, but one is just better because it has the academic language. And maybe that would help them see, okay, I'm on the right track, but I need to make sure I do, these things. So that could be, or if you wanted to use, 1 or 2, you could just kind of highlight, cover the name up and show them, and they could see that way. But that's another suggestion. So we can say that we made growth. Yay! That's good. That's something to celebrate. So I just kind of wanted us to reflect now that we know that using the Think Right Share method and the peer review checklist were kind of our main literacy strategies to move them through increasing the use of academic language. We can kind of reflect on the cycle and see how the students have been impacted. So the first question is, what worked well for you during our collaboration and coaching cycle? And how was your teaching positively impacted?
So what worked well? Well, we worked well together.
Yes, definitely.
But the other thing was just introducing me to looking at these problems from them, the peer review checklist, because it also helped me giving them something to look for. It helped me to have something to look for, because sometimes you know what to look for, but when you have that checklist, you can say, "Oh, okay, where's the how and why?" And I say that in my head, but I don't think they know that that's what I'm thinking.
That's what you're looking
or what
for.
I'm looking for. So I think that really impacted me positively. And then, just the students were very receptive to you. And I think it showed that because we
Work
like,
well.
we talk to each other, you show me things, and we kind of work well together, and it was demonstrated in front of the students because they were able to see that. So
okay, so that kind of answers the second question: how do you feel our collaboration positively impacted the students? I think it matters when there's a very good teacher co-teacher relationship, and the students feel like, okay, they have our best interest at heart, and we should try.
Yeah, and as the teacher, being open to receive something that you may not have thought of. Like, I go through these problems, but not in that way. So it gave me, because the whole point is that they have to understand this is where math is, and this is where we're going, and you have to understand these words and these problems.
And be able to use them.
And be able to use it. And so the checklist, and then being able to talk, and just being able to see someone else's work versus your own,
I think that makes a huge
made
difference.
a big difference for them. Because now I'm looking, and so then someone's asking me, well, what is that? What does that say? Just for them to say, oh, well, maybe they can't read this, or maybe I'm not on the right track after I read someone else's paper.
Right.
So it was, I never thought of doing it, like, ever.
And it creates that student reflection, like, oh, like you said, maybe I wasn't on the right track, or oh, I didn't think of doing it that way. And it just gives them exposure. Because we, tend to do things our way or what's comfortable.
Yeah.
And that's a big shift, being able to show students multiple ways, even if we're not comfortable. But to see each other's and the way they think really opened up their eyes to be like, oh, well, I know my answer's right, but I didn't use any vocabulary words. Or, I didn't even think to just do a table like other students did. So that really helped them be more reflective. Any challenges or missed opportunities in our work together?
The only challenge is that we did it in between testing.
Yes.
So we weren't able to flow
all the way through.
All the way through, like starting on Monday, maybe ending on Friday, or however we were going to do our flow. Testing, I think spring break.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So testing,
timing.
Yes.
Was a challenge.
But there wasn't loss, so that's good.
No.
It was, they didn't digress.
No.
Any other thoughts, like last thoughts, or something that you would continue doing moving forward that you felt like worked well and you would like to keep that going?
The checklist, because I was thinking of next year, because this year's almost over. So I was thinking of the checklist and having it posted, and starting our school year with them getting that peer review process through the year, so we can grow in that way. And like the vocabulary, even though I focus, I realize that I have to focus more intentionally, because I do it, but not intentionally, so they can understand what the word means, not just, I need to put this word in here, but how do I use the word?
Right.
So we did some vocabulary activity that was in
the book,
with
like the
flow
chart.
Model, the flow chart. It caused them to think more about the word versus just writing a definition down on the paper. So for me, it would be focusing more on vocabulary intentionally and using the peer review checklist when we're doing these types of problems.
Great. Okay. Well, I thank you so much for allowing me to come and work with your